Welcome to another deep dive. Today we're cracking open episode 12 of Cocktail Party Chemistry, Cannabinoid Chemistry, Balancing Highs and Healing.
Sounds intriguing.
It is. There's so much more to this than just THC and CBD. You ready to explore some seriously cool factoids about cannabinoids?
Absolutely. I'm always fascinated by the latest discoveries in this field.
Me too. All right, let's start with the basics, THC and CBD. I mean, everyone's heard of them, but even these two have some unexpected twists.
For sure, like how THC gets you high, but CBD doesn't, right?
Right. How can they both interact with our bodies, but have such wildly different effects? What's the secret?
Well, it all boils down to how these compounds bind to receptors in our brains, specifically the CB1 receptor.
The one receptor, okay.
Yeah. So when THC latches onto this receptor, it kicks off a chain reaction that leads to that classic high feeling. But CBD, on the other hand, it doesn't bind to CB1 in the same way.
So that's why it doesn't have that psychoactive effect.
Exactly. Instead, it interacts with other receptors and can even mess with THC's binding, which is why some people say it lessens the high.
So it's like CBD is putting the brakes on the THC high.
You could say that. And this whole interplay between THC and CBD really highlights just how complex the endocannabinoid system is. It's all about balance, and different cannabinoids can tip the scales in different ways.
Hold on, endocannabinoid system. I think you might have lost me there.
Oh, it's just a fancy way of saying it's a network of receptors and natural compounds in your body.
Okay.
But they play a crucial role. This system regulates a whole bunch of functions: mood, pain, even your appetite and sleep.
So it's like our brains have their own built-in cannabis system.
Exactly, working behind the scenes all the time to keep things running smoothly.
That's crazy.
It is. One of these natural compounds, anandamide, is particularly interesting. People call it the bliss molecule.
The bliss molecule.
Yeah, because it's involved in feelings of happiness and well-being.
So we have this internal balancing act going on with our endocannabinoid system. And then cannabinoids from outside sources, like, cannabis, come in and mix things up.
Precisely.
Wow. Okay, this is already blowing my mind, but I'm ready for more. You mentioned something earlier about a high blocker.
Yeah.
Tell me more about that. Is there really something that can totally block a high?
Well, it's not quite as simple as a single high blocker compound. But we are learning more and more about how different cannabinoids can change the effects of THC.
So it's about finding the right combination of cannabinoids to achieve the desired effects.
You got it. And that brings us to some of the lesser-known cannabinoids, which are even more intriguing than THC and CBD, in my opinion.
Okay, hit me with it. Which one are we talking about first?
Let's start with THCV. This one's a real curveball when it comes to appetite.
Yes. The appetite paradox.
Right. Everyone knows THC gives you the munchies, but THCV actually suppresses appetite. It's kind of the opposite of what you'd expect, right?
It's like a diet drug, but from cannabis. That's insane.
I know. It really highlights the amazing diversity of these compounds. Now imagine a cannabinoid that could actually make you smarter.
Okay, now you've got my attention.
That's where CBG comes in.
GBG.
Yep. It's non-psychoactive, but early research is suggesting it might be good for brain health and learning.
Wow. So we've got compounds that get you high, compounds that block the high, some that stimulate appetite, some that suppress it, and now some that might even make you smarter. It's like this plant is a walking pharmacy.
It is pretty incredible, isn't it?
Okay, so we've talked about THC, CBD, the endocannabinoid system, THCV, and even CBG. Before we dive into more fascinating cannabinoid facts, maybe we should take a step back and really break down how these compounds interact with our bodies. Like, what's the deal with these receptors we keep mentioning?
Good point. Understanding the basics is key to appreciating the finer points.
So what exactly are receptors?
Think of receptors like little doorways on your cell.
Doorways.
Yeah. But they're super picky. Only certain molecules can fit in, like keys fitting into locks.
Okay, so cannabinoids are like keys, and the receptors in our brains are the locks.
Exactly. When a cannabinoid, let's say THC, binds to a receptor, it triggers a whole chain reaction inside the cell. That's what leads to the effects we associate with cannabis. Changes in mood, perception, appetite, the whole shebang.
And different cannabinoids bind to different receptors, right? That's why they have such different effects.
Precisely. For example, THC mostly binds to the CB1 receptor, which is all over the brain and central nervous system.
And that's why it has those psychoactive effects.
You got it. Now, CBD, it has a more complicated relationship with receptors. It doesn't bind to CB1 as strongly as THC does, which is why it's not psychoactive.
So it's like a weaker key for that lock.
Yeah, you could say that. But here's the interesting part. CBD can actually affect how other molecules, like THC, bind to CB1. It's like CBD is changing the fit of the key, so the lock reacts differently.
Wow, so it's modulating the effects of THC at a molecular level.
Exactly. This complex dance between cannabinoids and receptors is what makes this whole field so fascinating.
And it's not just CB1, right? There are other receptors too.
You're right, there's also the CB2 receptor, which is found mainly in the immune system.
So cannabinoids can affect our immune response too.
Absolutely. And we're constantly uncovering new cannabinoid receptors and what roles they play in all kinds of bodily processes. It's really just the tip of the iceberg.
This is incredible.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've laid the groundwork with receptors. Now I'm ready to get back to those specific cannabinoids and their unique effects.
Let's do it. There's so much more to uncover. I'm with you. There's just so much we're still learning about how these compounds interact with our bodies.
Right. Like you were saying earlier, different cannabinoids bind to different receptors, so people might respond to them in different ways depending on their genes, right?
Exactly. It's fascinating how much individual variation there is. What might be an effective dose for one person could be way too much or too little for someone else. It's really remarkable how much our genes play a role in how we respond to things like medicines.
Totally. It's like our bodies are all wired just a bit differently. So how do we go from this one-size-fits-all approach to something more personalized, especially when it comes to cannabinoids?
Well, that's where pharmacogenetics comes in.
Pharmaco what now?
Pharmacogenetics. It's the study of how our genes influence how we react to drugs.
Okay, so basically, if we know enough about someone's genes, we could predict how they might respond to certain cannabinoids.
You got it. We could figure out who's more likely to benefit from a specific compound or dosage, or who might experience side effects.
That's amazing. So instead of just throwing a bunch of different things at a problem and hoping something sticks, we could actually tailor treatments to the individual.
Precisely. It's like having a personalized roadmap for treatment. And honestly, this type of genetic testing is already used for some medications.
Really?
Yeah, but when it comes to cannabinoids and psychedelics, we're still in the early stages of understanding how genes affect individual responses.
I see. But I'm sure as research continues, we'll see more personalized approaches to treatment emerge.
Absolutely. And it's not just genetics that matters. There are other things that can impact a person's response too. Age, weight, metabolism, even their past experiences or mental state can influence how they react.
Oh, wow. So there's really no single factor that determines how someone will respond. It's
Yeah.
this whole complex web of influences.
Exactly. It's a combination of their genetics, biology, psychology, and their environment. It's complicated stuff.
It really highlights the need for responsible use too, doesn't it? People have to understand that these substances can affect everyone differently.
Definitely. Start low, go slow, be aware of potential interactions, and know your own sensitivities. That's crucial.
And of course, more research is always good.
Absolutely. The more we understand about all the factors that influence how someone reacts to these compounds, the better equipped we'll be to develop truly safe and effective treatments. Personalized, too.
It's like moving away from guesswork and into the era of precision medicine.
Exactly. And who knows what other innovations are waiting to be discovered. It's such an exciting field to be a part of right now.
I completely agree. So we've covered a lot. The potential of personalized treatment, innovative drug delivery systems, the challenges of integrating these substances into healthcare. What else is there to explore in this fascinating world of plant-based medicine?
You know, something we haven't talked about yet is the entourage effect.
The entourage effect.
Yeah.
That sounds interesting.
It is. It's basically the idea that the therapeutic effects of, say, cannabis are greater than the sum of its parts. Like, it's not just about THC or CBD on their own, but how they work together with all the other compounds in the plant.
Okay, I think I'm following. So the entourage effect suggests that whole plant extracts are more powerful than isolated compounds.
Precisely. And we see this synergy with other plants too, not just cannabis. Think about essential oils or herbal remedies. It's this beautiful orchestra of compounds all working together to produce a greater effect.
It really makes you appreciate the complexity of nature, doesn't it?
It does. And it's a concept that could change how we approach medicine and wellness on a much broader scale.
That's a fascinating thought. Okay, so we've talked about personalized medicine, drug delivery systems, the challenges of integration, and now this intriguing entourage effect. I feel like we've barely scratched the surface, though.
You're not wrong. The world of cannabinoids, psychedelics, and plant-based medicine is constantly evolving. There's always more to discover.
It's an exciting time to be following these developments. Okay, before we get too lost in the weeds here, I think it's important to bring our discussion back down to earth and talk about some of the real-world challenges and ethical considerations surrounding these substances.
I agree. While the potential benefits are huge, we can't just ignore the potential downsides. We need to be careful and responsible.
Absolutely. So, what are some of the biggest challenges we face as these substances become more mainstream?
Well, for one, we need to make sure people have access to safe, high-quality
That
products.
makes sense. You don't want people getting sick from something that's supposed to help them,
Right. With the demand for these therapies growing, there's a risk of adulterated or contaminated products hitting the market. We need to be vigilant.
especially with psychedelics. Those can have some pretty intense effects if not used properly. So strong regulations and responsible sourcing are critical.
I couldn't agree more. Yeah, and it's not just about product safety either. We also need to figure out how to integrate these new therapies into our current healthcare systems.
That's a great point. It's not as simple as just adding a new pill to the list, right?
Right. It requires a whole shift in how we think about health and wellness. We need to move away from just treating symptoms.
And start focusing on the root causes, right?
Right.
Looking at the whole picture, mind, body, spirit.
Exactly. That's where cannabinoids and psychedelics really have the potential to change things. They offer this incredible opportunity to tap into the body's natural ability to heal and regulate itself.
I love that idea.
Yeah.
But how do we actually make it happen? How do we integrate these substances into our healthcare systems when there are so many logistical and ethical hurdles, not to mention the regulations?
It's definitely a challenge. It's not going to be easy or happen overnight, but I think it's possible if we approach it with careful planning, open communication, and a willingness to adapt.
I like your optimism. Okay, so how do we start bridging that gap?
Well, first and foremost, education is key. We need to make sure healthcare professionals are up to date on the latest research about cannabinoids and psychedelics. The endocannabinoid system, the potential benefits and risks.
That makes perfect sense. Doctors and nurses need the right information to make informed decisions about these therapies for their patients.
Absolutely. And it's not just medical professionals either. We need to educate the public as well.
To dispel those lingering myths and stigmas.
Exactly. We need to create safe spaces for people to learn and explore these therapies, whether that's in specialized clinics, community support groups, or even just through reliable online resources.
It's about making sure people feel comfortable and supported when they access these treatments, right? Especially with all the stigma still surrounding these substances.
You got it. And it's crucial that these therapies are available to everyone who needs them, regardless of their financial situation or where they live.
So equity and affordability are essential parts of this conversation.
Absolutely. We can't have a system where only the wealthy can access these potentially life-changing treatments.
I couldn't agree more. It sounds like this whole integration process is going to require a massive collaborative effort. We need to change policies, educate the public, develop infrastructure, and honestly shift our collective mindset about health and healing.
It's a tall order, but I think it's worth it. The potential benefits of these therapies are too great to ignore.
You're right. And who knows what other amazing discoveries are waiting for us down the line.
It's truly an exciting time to be exploring the world of plant-based medicine.
Sure.
So much potential for healing and growth.
Well, this has been an incredible journey. We've covered a lot of ground today.
Right.
From cannabinoid chemistry and personalized medicine to the challenges of integration and the potential of the entourage effect.
It's been a whirlwind of information, but hopefully it's left you feeling inspired and empowered to continue learning about these amazing substances.
To our listeners, thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the world of cannabinoids and psychedelics.
We encourage you to keep exploring, stay curious, and engage in thoughtful conversations about the future of medicine and well-being.
Until next time, happy deep diving.